Well, hello and welcome to my cellar. This is the 124th numbered one, and there was one unnumbered one, and then there was 30 of the other ones, and 25 stories, and 30 tales, and a couple, three others that we didn't number. This must be about the 184th video on my channel now, I guess. And here we are in week 8 of Shelter in Place. Here in my state, we're going to start being able to go out and go places in tiny groups or no groups at all in another week or so. So we're all looking forward to that. I don't know how your state's doing. I hope you all are well and healthy, and that the coronavirus hasn't affected you too grievously. I hope you've not lost anyone. And a great shout out to the doctors and nurses and other first responders who have been slogging it out this whole time on our behalf. And now 2 people in the White House have tested positive, and the whole West Wing's been exposed. Fingers crossed. All right. Let's see. We got some things to respond to. None of us go about all day with a broadsword strapped to our hip killing stuff. Clearly, you've never been to Florida. Well, actually, I have been to Florida several times. My parents moved to Florida when they retired, and we visited with them several times, and I fished down there a few times. A broadsword would just be too impractical where I was in Florida. A machete would be very, very useful, or a long tactical knife, perhaps. But a broadsword, no. Now, I don't know. You got Florida, man. So when it comes to squirreliness, you guys, Mothman in West Virginia, I can see it now. We'll sell tickets. Mothman versus Florida Man. Here we go. Okay. Okay. This is a comment on my comment about really big people playing small characters and vice versa. My first peer gaming group was like that. The DM was a tall dude who grew to at least 6'3" by his 18th birthday, who loved to play underestimatable gnomes. Okay. Gnomes and hobbits and other tiny creatures pranking the party. And this follows up on the second one I have here. And it's like, that's right, it's role-playing. Contrary to what most newbies think, the origins of role-play game didn't include dice. Even in combat, you had to role-play. Suck it up, Buttercup. Well, I don't know about role-playing without dice. But that's right, it is role-playing. If you're a little bitty dude and you want to be Thundar the Barbarian, that's why it's role-playing. It's funny. A lot of tall people, this is an anecdotal reference, but a lot of tall people, role players, really like playing short characters. Now, all of us that consider ourselves short have always thought, oh yeah, man, if I was 6'4", I'd be a basketball player, and I'd do this and I'd do that. And we all want to be tall. But I got to wonder if tall people don't get tired of bumping their heads and tall jokes and how's the weather up here and like to play short people. Makes sense to me. And that's what role-playing's all about. Be something you aren't. If you're not a dash into danger type, do you play one? Sometimes you play something you are or ascribe a wish to be. Wish to be an arcane wizard who can control the forces in the universe. Who wouldn't? Wish to be that dude that could lay on hands or just give you a little, band-aid and an aspirin and make you all better. Like the Uber Corpsman or Uber Medic. So that's what role-playing sets, that's what it's about. Okay, this next one, I cut and pasted the whole thing. Thanks for all your stories of gaming history and advice. It's a pleasure to come here, have my steady voice, bringing entertainment and knowledge about the hobby, providing a momentary escape from the stress of COVID. Well, you're welcome. Along those lines, I've done 30 tales from the cellar, just speaking about what was going on and craziness going on and inconsistencies. And then the thing I really had a good time with, and I wish I could do more of, but I ran out of children's books to read. I don't have any little kids that live with me anymore, and I've read everything that's, easily readable for, youngsters to sit down and listen to. Everything else I have is long, involved stories. And I'm certainly not going to read them a bunch of Brothers Grimm, because I have all those in the original versions, and they're quite grisly. But you're welcome. I enjoy doing it. I figure, if 6 people sit down and watch it and get a chuckle, hey, I'm glad I made 6 people chuckle. Now to the question behind all those lovely things is, how did you set about building your campaign setting? What influences did you draw from, and what is your favorite part of your creation and why? Okay, there was Carbondale, and I didn't have a world. I barely had a continent. Now, I didn't mean that we didn't explore a lot of it, and there were ruins that we traveled to from place to place, and we were building on it. But it was a build as you go. I didn't build it any faster than I had to, because I wasn't sure where we were going to go next anyway. And I wasn't going to build out a whole 4 counties, not knowing which one of the 4, or shires, or whichever, without knowing which one of the 4 we were likely to go to and spend time in. Now, that was then. Since then, yes, I have constructed a world called Nikanda, and it has a backstory, an extensive backstory about a cataclysm that was unleashed by dabbling in forces best left undabbled with, and how survivors after the ages of barbarism and et cetera, long story, created the Chromatic Council, who now keep a harsh lid and rein in the magic users from being crazy. And the part of my world that I enjoy the most, and I've used this in and out of several of the things that I've written, because I write them all on my world, is that magic doesn't work the same everywhere. As a result of this cataclysmic sundering of the continents and, et cetera, mana, the force that is manipulated by magic users that permeates the universe, not the force, but the energy, ley lines. Okay, anyway, it's disrupted. And in some places, your fireball will barely light a trash basket. And in other places, your light the trash basket will set the cabin on fire. So players soon learn that you better test it before you do anything. And it's interesting in several of the different tests and sessions that I've run that take place on my world. They've almost all come up with the same solution. when they know things are working right, they'll cast um, a light spell on a coin, or so, something small, crystal, whatever. And when they're in a new area, if that rascal's glowing brighter, they know they're in a high mana area. And if it's very dim and hard to see at all, they know they're in a low mana area. I don't have a lot of low mana areas, though they can be a nuisance if something happens there. I don't have a lot of high ones, but in places that, anyway, that's what I enjoy, because they gotta think constantly. And so it throws curveballs to the magic users. The other change that I've made in my worldview is that clerics don't throw spells. Clerics say prayers. In my world, when a cleric reaches a certain level of promotion, it's assumed that he's learned all the prayers for that next level. That's how he got there, learning those along the way. Now, they're only able to pray, to say so many prayers of certain potencies in a day. I keep that part of the structure, but they don't have to commit in advance. So clerics have much greater flexibility. Now, they can only, if we'll say a cleric is able to cast 2 2s and 2 1s, in this case, pray at that level. They can pick any first level prayer, any second level prayer, and if they've used both their first and they want to burn a second to say another first, they can. Only one. They don't get a 2-for-1 swap out, and that slot is burned for the day. So I justify that as some sort of trance-like state that they have to achieve briefly, and it wears them out, and they can only do it so many times during a day. So I like that. Okay. On a Facebook thread today, I promised that I would address this topic because people are up in arms about it and discussing it and outraged and shocked, and that's something that goes way back to the beginning of the game, and that's the sex, the gender limits in D&D. Now, I gotta explain this. You have to understand a little bit of the background at the time this stuff came up. There were conflicting camps in the people that were accepting role-playing games and getting into them. Some of them just wanted to go drop into the persona of something with eight legs swimming through the ether. But others couldn't let go of realism. They wanted more realism in a fantasy game. And this was a time of changing mores, changing viewpoints, changing outlooks. This was in the later 70s. And we'd been through the sexual revolution in the late 60s and early 70s, and now we're in the late 70s. And there's 4 primary people that are the cause of all the hoorah today. Those people were Gary Gygax, Brian Bloom, Tim Kask, and Leonard Lakofka. There was another unseen person, mindset, prevailing thought to blame. It was manifested in the fanzines, the apazines that were out then. For those of you that haven't heard me explain it. Apazines were the Amateur Press Association. They were people, and if you belonged to an apazine, you could write whatever you want. You sent them so many copies that was equal to the number of their subscription lists. And this is back when everything was mimeoed or Xeroxed at expensive Xeroxing. And everybody wanted to print theirs on a different color paper, because then you sent them to a coordinator who stacked them all up, one of everybody's, stapled them all together and sent them out. So this thing for realism. And at this point in time, we, being TSR, primarily Gary and I, were watching what was going on the ongoing developing acceptance and growth of the game. Just as I invented the belay to eat dwarven ponies, because they were overrunning the game, this cries for realism. Well, at the beginning, basically, it was called a fighting man, but that was more a function of the way the English language was used. Fighter is what all of us eventually ended up calling fighter. It had no gender. There was nothing gender specific about a cleric or a magic user. And people wanted to be more realistic, because of the way we wrote the rules originally, the way Gary wrote the rules originally, there was no gender limitations. If a female wanted to sit down and roll up a character, we didn't. There was no reason to say you're limited here, you're limited there, or you get bonuses here or there. There was no reason to. Then this cry for more realism. Again, this isn't a fantasy game. You know, I did not see those people sending outraged fan mail to Marvel to quit making all the females in distress have great huge breasts and long legs. Because that certainly wasn't realistic either. But, pardon me, not a dry cough. We've been social distancing now since the 12th of March. And only going out for grocery runs once a week or so. Where was I? Sorry, before the coughing jag. Okay, the demands for realism. And Gary and I would frequently had talks about where the game was going, how it was evolving, how it was developing. And we were very cognizant of all this demand about realism and what have you. And so Lenny Lakofka is a great guy, don't get me wrong. We have some game development design differences, as you know, no big deal. I would expect it. Anyway, he and Gary were tight back then. Apparently they'd been talking about this also. I mean, I don't know, I'm guessing. And anyway, at one of our, this is going on, what do we do about it, whatever. It was suggested that, to me, that Lenny was going to address it, and that it would be a good thing to publish. Well, as I've said before, I never got handed something, here, you must do this. And this is one of only maybe two or three ever that I was told, here, it would be good if this was published. Okay, that just didn't happen. But I sort of agreed with the idea that, yeah, we needed to address the issue. Now, at the same time, Brian Bloom was a vocal, rabid supporter of realism. Now, to be fair, he also lampooned it and did a little piece that I use as a filler somewhere. If you want realism about stats, here's what you can do to stat yourself. What can you lift, divide by 10, etc., etc. Okay, and IQ, last IQ test divided by 10. That's your intelligence quotient and your intelligence. And charisma was something silly, like how many times you'd been on in the newspaper or on TV or something like that. Otherwise, you didn't have any. But Brian was a big deal about it. It's ridiculous to think that any woman, even one of these dubious as to the sex Russian women weightlifters and powerlifters, couldn't lift as much as the strongest man. And it was just ridiculous to think they could. And Brian was all for realism. So somewhere along the line, at one point, if a woman was an 18, she couldn't be higher than an 1860. And what people need to keep in mind is 18 is super phenomenal strength, way above and beyond the average person. An 18 double aught is the guy from Game of Thrones who just set the deadlift at 1151 kilograms. That's an 18 double aught. That's as strong as human being gets. Anything beyond that's a demigod. That's Hercules. So, even the most fearsome looking Russian woman couldn't possibly lift that much. So Brian thought that things should be scaled back, 30, 40, 50, 60%. They couldn't be as they couldn't have the same constitution, because at that time constitution was an aggregate measure of your shape, the condition you were in, etc., and your stamina, and other intangibles. So Brian didn't. So I got handed this time for Dragon 3, and I get handed an article by Lennikov. It was called Women and Magic. I certainly wasn't thrilled with portions of it when I got it, and I wish to God now I'd never published it, because it started this whole damn thing. And it was extremely sexist by today's standards. Yes. It's so easy for people today to go, oh, that's sexist, when they don't have any idea of the context of the culture or whatever. We've done this for generations, for eons. Human beings have done that. Oh, that's terrible. Well, given the context at the time, it was what it was. But he had some other crap in there about their charisma, and how charisma would affect different, if they had a high charisma, it would affect different things. And he was turning them into nymphs and seductresses. And, we'd always use charisma intangibly as, your ability to charm your way and con somebody into giving you information or presenting yourself as believable. Well, now he's, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and flashing a little boob. And I was uncomfortable with that. But that's where it came from. It was a product of the times. The gaming public wanted to see realism. Now, remembering when first edition was published, the same time that these magazines were coming out, that all these articles were coming out, first edition was a reflection of the time. There was nobody seriously arguing that a female could lift as much weight as a male. Or now, how many women actually believe, how many females actually believe that on average, if you went out to the local park, let's get fit people, and grab 10 guys at random and 10 women at random of the same relative age, that those women are going to be able to lift as much weight. And remember that strength in lifting was the key element that we applied. Strength, bending bars, breaking down doors, stuff that required bulk and muscle. And let's face it, pick any favorite TV show you want, the female lead, and picture her trying to bash down a door. Compared to somebody, say, just the size of Chris Noth when he was in his prime. This is what we were dealing with. Today, I still don't believe that you'll find any women as strong as the strongest men. That's simply muscles lifting brute strength. I'm not going anywhere else in this argument. That's how it came about. It was a reflection of its times, taken in the context of its societal norm at the time. It didn't raise an eyebrow. In fact, it was like, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. That, all right, now it's more realistic. We gave people what they wanted at the time. Sometimes we decided they didn't need it, we took it back. Obviously, I guess they cleaned it up in second edition. People wanted to know why. That's why. That's where it came from. That's when it came from. And the when, especially as a former history teacher, the when is the most pertinent of those points. There's a reflection. Remember, those books were published in 76, 77, 78. That's 42 years ago. If you don't believe society changes in 40 years, you haven't studied history. That's, by statisticians' count, 40 years, that's 2 generations. Just look at I look at the slang that everyone my age knew. And now I say it around my grandchildren, let alone my great-grandchildren. They have no idea what I'm saying. The language can change radically in 2 generations. Last night, I did something crazy. I published an invite to come chat in a Zoom room. Had maybe 8 people show up all together. And we had a good time. We just sat and talked about this and talked about that. And it wasn't all gaming or anything like that. And it proved to me that a concept that I'm working on rolling out right now is doable. And that is Cascoid's Theater of the Mind. Now, I got a response to that. And to this person, I'll say, you'll be the first one I'd sign up. Tim, you could ask $100 a player, easy, I'd pay it. Well, you can pay me $100 if you want to in the first game. But I'm not going to charge you. No. I thought I would charge a fee of $9.95. That's about 75 or 80% of a movie ticket. If you're lucky, you'll be in the movie theater 2 hours, 2 hours 15. Very seldom nowadays to get a good long movie. Whereas with these games of up to 7 players, you'll get 3, perhaps 3.5 hours of gameplay. It can be done remotely. I've done it several times now. I may still be doing it for North Texas. I don't know. I'm still on the fence, but I'm still going. Mainly because it's a good chance it'll be Doug's last. Because as everyone knows, Doug's been fighting cancer for several years now. But anyway, I've proven that it can be done. So I'm going to set up a special email box and figure out how we'll handle the funds. And I think starting, at least in the beginning, once or twice a month, I'll announce a game and see how many people sign up. And if a bunch of people sign up, I'll just run games until I use them all up. And then if it works out, well, maybe I'll do this a couple times a month. I think it'd be fun. I think you'd enjoy playing this form of the game that I'm running nowadays called the Wheel of Blame. Had some people play at a KoboCon, and they seemed to have a good time. They all hung around for about an hour afterwards, just BSing with us. We were all just talking. Usually when people didn't have a good time, they're the goodbye, or if you even get a goodbye. So I'm guessing. So this is something I'm definitely going to do. Let's see, how long has this been running now? About time to quit, I guess. Time to be quiet. So anyway, hang in there with this. This will be over soon. I don't expect to be able to play face to face with my buds before mid or late June. We play together. We try to get together online once a week, at least some of us, and play online. That's something y'all should be doing yourselves, is looking at connecting with your friends. Gaming is a very social activity. It's not just the playing of the game, but what else goes around it. And we need to stay social in these times of isolation. We're going to get through this. I don't know how well. We have idiot governors opening up way too soon, in my opinion. I know I'll be wearing a mask for weeks to come. And if my Sutton Hoo mask gets here in time, I'll be wearing it whether I need it or not, just because it's so cool. So take care of yourselves and your family. For those of you that are out of work right now, and I can only imagine the despair and the frustration. It's not anything I'm really even qualified to comment on. But I do feel for you. Stay healthy. Sneeze in your elbow. Wash your hands a bunch. Don't touch your face. If you do go out, wear a mask. Every time you come out of the store and put your stuff in your car, get out your hand sanitizer and clean your hands right there before you get in and touch your steering wheel. When you get home, do your steering wheel with your wet hand sanitizer, with a little sanitizer still in your hands. Rubs it into you and probably cleans your wheel off a little bit. And until we can all game in person together again, Dodata Govi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.